Welcome. Thanks for joining me here on Plan to Grow. My name is Zintis Vandelis, and I'm a solutions advisor here at Vena. Pick up an industry report on data analytics, and you're likely to read about a business with high-quality data systems and insights augmented by AI and machine learning all throughout. Often these case studies feature Silicon Valley companies born out of the industry of data. Maybe a Google or a Microsoft might come to mind. The reality we see through our clients at a software company like Vena is that is not the norm. Not everyone lives in that ivory tower of a pure technology company. In reality, organizations face all kinds of challenges trying to deliver on the promise of analytics. We see projects of absolutely tremendous scale trying to synchronize different systems together. We see data silos that are spread across many departments, entities, and operational areas of the business that need to be broken down. And if a company is using some advanced analytics, that technology is often applied unevenly throughout the business and doesn't really paint a full picture. To deliver on these challenges, finance professionals have turned into acrobats. They're finding ways of delivering insights using their own sort of ad hoc processes, and often in spite of the tools that they have on hand. It's obvious that AI and machine learning alone will not save us from these sorts of problems. And I can sympathize a lot with teams that find themselves stitching together lots of technologies and man hours, all to produce maybe a few simple KPIs and a board deck every month. That's all too common. In our industry benchmark report, as of 2020, we found that 45% of respondents had invested in a BI tool to date. 40% were actively sharing KPIs with the rest of the company, and only 7% currently had some AI systems live and operational, although close to 30% were in the process of developing one. Regardless where you are along that adoption curve towards a more data-oriented business, there's lots of concrete steps any organization can take. So today we'll look at some strategies that I would recommend to a company that's maybe on that journey already and might be feeling some of those pains that I mentioned earlier. Before we get deeper into the challenges, I'd first like to address the big opportunity that I see in this space as well. It really boils down to two factors, and that would be affordability and consumerization. So let's look at affordability first. Over the last several years, being an early Tableau customer myself, I remember when these individual licenses would cost thousands of dollars. And we've now seen the prices drop from those sorts of highs to maybe tens of dollars, or in some cases even free. If you consider Power BI, which many analysts would regard as the, kind of dominant force in that analytical tool market space right now, they're currently operating on a freemium model, whereby you can use it completely free of charge and only pay a nominal $10 a month fee if you want to be able to share those charts and visualizations with other people inside your business. So it kind of begs the question, why so cheap, right? We know these tools have tremendous value to companies, so why would they market them at these rates? And the answer is really quite simple. It's that Amazon and Google and Microsoft, they all have their own web services ecosystems now with Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. And so they're really looking at these tools now as loss leaders rather than marketing them independently. It creates a golden opportunity if you're maybe looking to experiment for the first time in this ecosystem, and your company isn't ready for a large upfront capital investment yet. So next, let's look at consumerization. So a finance user today can really download and apply pre-built machine learning and AI models across big segments of their data using drag and drop interfaces, simple selection menus. It's a very, very different world than it was even a few years before. And AI and machine learning are now surfacing key insights as well, whereby, in the past you had to ask a very specific question. What is the year-over-year change in X and Y? It's now delivering these insights to you and trying to surface whichever anomalies or patterns it finds that maybe are the most material to you and your business. So it seems likely to me that this is going to become the norm in every finance and ops team in the future. But how can organizations be better prepared for this change in the future? So I'd first like to suggest that thinking 2 or even 3 steps ahead is really a must in this area. And let's look at a few reasons why. So it's my belief that companies that invest today in new tools are going to discover in years to come that the quality of the data just isn't quite there. And furthermore, they may discover that they just simply haven't been capturing enough data. So let's look at the first issue first, which is the issue of quality. I'm sure we've all heard the term garbage in, garbage out. This really just speaks to the idea that if we don't set up adequate guardrails at the source in terms of our different systems and applications, it's going to severely hamper our ability to accurately forecast off of those results in the future. And that's where we see finance users, again, trying to patch those holes. So setting up those guardrails up front will save yourself a lot of time and pain in the future. Next, let's look at the quantity issue. Having software in place to capture enough of that data is what's going to enable you to do some of that high value time series analysis, machine learning sort of applications. And people that are still mired in older, maybe spreadsheet systems that they've devised themselves are going to find that to be an impossible challenge. While most other functional areas of a business have transitioned to a more agile mindset, of continuous change and transformation, the fact is that the needs of analytics are a little bit at odds with that. And you kind of have to make a little bit more of a firm decision about what sorts of KPIs and drivers are going to, affect growth into the future. If you take the example of, let's say, a client who had solidified their Salesforce CRM, maybe for several consecutive years while they were gathering customer data, they're going to be able to make insights about those customers that would be simply impossible if that same client had maybe re-implemented their CRM several times in between. And there's a number of reasons for that. First, if we look at the time series effect, if we only have 1 or 2 years of consecutive data, it's going to be very hard to draw seasonal conclusions about maybe our sales cycle. Or maybe the sample size is just going to be simply too small for each one of those sort of snapshots for each of those years. And then we also have the challenge of trying to normalize that data across multiple implementations and never being fully confident in the insights that we're driving off of that data. While most other functional areas of a business have transitioned to a more agile mindset of continuous change and transformation, the fact is that the needs of data analytics are fundamentally somewhat at odds with that. It kind of forces you to make a firm decision about which drivers and KPIs are going to be affecting growth into the future. And committing to them, at least for a period of time. And if we take the example, let's say, of a company that had solidified their Salesforce CRM for several consecutive years versus a company that had maybe re-implemented that several times in between, it's really going to be night and day in terms of what insights company A can drive versus company B. And there's a number of reasons for that. First off, if we consider the fact that the time series data for company A is going to be solid all throughout. So they can look at seasonal patterns and buying that just wouldn't be possible if you had those individual snapshots. Secondly, the sample size may just be too small for company B to really draw any kinds of meaningful conclusions. And lastly, company A won't have the problem of trying to normalize all of that data across those multiple implementations in order to really understand what's happening and get that full picture. And we do see this all the time at Vena, where in addition to being acrobats, finance professionals become almost historians about which ERP or which source system that data might be coming from and whether that can be relied upon. So it just creates additional challenges on top of those more surface level challenges of trying to create the right KPIs and the right visualizations that you need. Complete planning platforms like Vena really play a critical role in that area in terms of acting as that single source of truth. So we discussed consumerization earlier, and I'd like to reassure everyone that consumerization will not be replacing industry knowledge and expertise, in this decade or even in decades to come. And that's a bold claim, so let me elaborate on that. As the capabilities of these tools continue to improve in leaps and bounds, it only places a greater need to ask the right sorts of questions, as well as a greater need for understanding around how that source data was gathered, and maybe also where the limitations are in its use. So if you consider today the finance or operational professional who's manually producing those data analytics today, in the future, they'll be relied upon much more to correctly interpret what those KPIs mean, as well as maybe understanding where the boundaries are in that data and steering the organization away from any misleading conclusions from it. So in our last segment, I'd like to look at 3 key takeaways for any analytical organization. First up, have a organization level data plan. And really what this ought to be is a complete roadmap from where you are today and where you would like to get to in terms of the sorts of insights and analytics that you're able to drive from the data that you have available. And, looking at the major blockers that you might face in terms of recognizing that vision is going to be a really key step. Every company that I've worked for, every client that I've looked at on behalf of Vena, everybody has skeletons in their closet as it regards data. So really recognizing those and looking at ways of either circumventing them or directly addressing them is going to be a key step in that plan. And next up, trying to identify those areas where maybe there's the most immediate need or the most opportunity as it relates to data analytics. So it's historically been my experience that sales teams tend to get the shiniest tools the earliest. But I think it's just as valid to look at other departmental rollouts and looking at ways of minimizing cost using AI, machine learning, or just conventional data analytics is just as valid. And finally, picking the right tools at the right time for your business. So making sure that you're committing to applications and platforms that are going to be able to scale as you scale and not become another inhibitor down the line. And next up, collaboration. Looking at ways of making finance a much more strategic partner in the business is going to yield a lot of benefits over the long term. It's finance. It's going to be able to surface some of those key insights about areas where maybe there's potential cost saving or where we can drive additional revenue. It's going to come down to finance and operations to surface those insights. And next up, as discussed before, breaking down some of those organizational silos. The most successful implementations I've seen at Vena historically have had, organization-wide buy-in, at least at some level, when they're deploying a new analytical solution or a new planning solution. And for our final takeaway, we have data-minded thinkers or data-minded thinking. If we consider the sorts of individuals that are really going to thrive in that sort of AI-powered future that we're all eagerly anticipating, they're really going to have to grow it and adapt into that new reality. And it's my opinion that thinking is going to have to be imbued from the mid-level managers all the way up to the executive team. And let me give you a concrete example. If we look at a company-wide sales projection, that sales projection can only be as good as the individual projections that are forwarded on, from each sales director. So unless the whole company isn't, in lockstep in terms of enabling a better solution in terms of planning and analysis, it becomes very difficult to deliver on that vision. And it's really going to involve looking at the ways in which we've made decisions historically, and also what is the potential of our data? What questions can we ask of the data that we haven't already? And I see finance as playing a very key strategic role in this area, not just in terms of actually performing that analysis, operating those tools, but also as acting as arbiters in terms of ensuring that only good data and good conclusions are being derived from that analytical system. So those are our 3 key takeaways, and I want to thank you again for joining us here on Plan to Grow. My name is Zintis Vandelis. Thank you and have a wonderful day.